It was one of those mornings when everything felt slightly out of control. The coffee machine had stopped working, his daughter couldn't find her shoes, and he was already running late for work. Being a single dad wasn't easy, but he had learned to laugh through the chaos. Some days laughter was all he had to keep going. He worked at a small community center in the middle of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was a place that brought people together. Children playing, old folks talking, and volunteers helping wherever they could. He handled almost everything there, from maintenance to planning small local events. It didn't pay much, but it gave him purpose. He liked the sense of belonging, and the people who came through the doors made his days feel lighter. That morning, the center was unusually busy. There was a special meeting happening, something about a new charity partnership. He wasn't really involved in that part of the planning, but he'd been asked to help set up chairs and arrange refreshments. By the time he was done, he was sweating, his shirt untucked, and his daughter, who had begged to tag along that day, was coloring quietly in the corner. Then the doors opened, and a group of people walked in, well-dressed, confident, and clearly from a very different world than his. They were from a large company that wanted to sponsor one of the community programs. At the center of the group was a woman, elegant, calm, and commanding attention without saying a word. She sat in a sleek wheelchair, moving with quiet confidence as her assistant guided her into the room. He noticed how people looked at her, with that mix of respect and discomfort. Some smiled too politely, others avoided eye contact. It wasn't cruel, but it was the kind of subtle distance that people often gave to someone they didn't quite know how to approach. He didn't know who she was, but he could tell she wasn't someone used to small-town chaos. Her clothes were simple but expensive, her posture straight, her expression calm and unreadable. As he adjusted a chair near the refreshment table, she wheeled over slightly, probably trying to make space for her team. Without thinking much, he smiled and said, "Sorry for the mess. We usually don't have fancy visitors here." She looked at him for a moment, and surprised, then amused. "Fancy visitors?" she repeated, her tone light. "Well," he said, scratching the back of his neck, "people who look like they came straight out of a business magazine." For a second, she didn't say anything. Then a small laugh escaped her, the kind that sounded real, not polite. "I guess that's one way to describe us," he smiled back. It wasn't much, but that short exchange broke something invisible, the careful barrier that usually surrounded her. The meeting went on, filled with business terms and numbers that didn't interest him. He kept busy in the background, refilling coffee, cleaning up spills, and occasionally checking on his daughter. Every now and then, he caught the woman glancing in his direction, not in a way that made him uncomfortable, but with curiosity, as if she wasn't used to being spoken to so casually. After the meeting, most of her team left quickly, heading to their cars and taking phone calls. She stayed behind, talking to one of the center's board members about future plans. When that conversation ended, she lingered near the table, looking at the posters on the wall, pictures of kids playing, families laughing, moments that captured ordinary joy. He approached carefully, unsure if she wanted company. "They're from last year's summer camp," he said. "We didn't have much budget, but the kids didn't care. They just needed a place to belong." She turned her chair slightly to face him. "You work here full-time?" "Yeah," he said. "Well, as full-time as it gets. I do whatever's needed. Fix things, organize stuff, sometimes even babysit if parents get stuck at work." Her eyes softened. "You must really love it here." He shrugged. "It's not always easy, but I like being useful. Besides, my daughter loves this place. She says it's more fun than home." At that, his little girl ran up, holding a drawing. "Look, I made a rainbow," she said proudly. The woman smiled. "That's beautiful. May I see it?" The child nodded and handed it to her. Without hesitation, the woman admired every color, asked what each one meant, and even asked if she could keep it for her office. The child's face lit up, and he couldn't help but smile. It was a simple moment, but there was something genuine in it, something that reminded him of kindness without pity. Later that day, as the woman's car pulled away, he found himself thinking about her, not because she was a CEO or someone important, but because of how she'd looked at his daughter, not as a stranger, but as a person. Days went by, and he didn't expect to see her again. But a week later, she returned. This time she came alone, without her team or assistant. She said she wanted to understand the center better before finalizing the sponsorship deal. He was surprised but glad to see her. They walked or rather moved on around the building together. He talked, she listened. Sometimes she asked thoughtful questions and sometimes she just watched quietly, observing how people interacted. When they passed a group of kids playing tag, one of them accidentally ran into her wheelchair. The boy froze, his face turning red with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," he blurted. She smiled and said gently, "It's okay. I've been hit by faster things," the boy laughed nervously. And she joined in, making the whole group feel at ease again. After the tour, they sat outside near the small garden. The late afternoon sun painted the sky with warm colors. She looked peaceful, but there was something in her eyes. A hint of tiredness, maybe something deeper. "You know," she said after a long pause, "people look at me and only see this chair. Sometimes I wonder if anyone remembers I had a life before it." He looked at her, unsure how to respond. Finally, he said softly, "I don't see the chair. I just see someone who's still moving forward." She turned to him slowly, as if his words carried more weight than he realized. "That's not what most people say," he shrugged. "Maybe they're looking at the wrong things." For a moment there was silence, not awkward but comfortable. The kind of silence that said everything words didn't need to. She asked about his life next, his daughter, his job, how he managed alone. He told her the truth. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Every day was a little messy, but full of small victories. Something about his honesty seemed to touch her. She didn't pity him. She respected him, and he felt the same about her. Before she left, she said, "You know, I don't usually talk this much during business visits." He smiled. "That's okay. I don't usually talk this much either." They both laughed, and when she wheeled away, he found himself smiling longer than he should have. That evening, his daughter asked, "Daddy, will the lady with the nice smile come again?" He didn't know what to say. "Maybe," he said softly. "Maybe she will." In the days that followed, she did come again, sometimes with her assistant, sometimes alone. She started volunteering at the center's reading sessions, sitting with children and helping them with stories. The kids adored her, especially his daughter. She and the single dad began to talk more, not just about work or the project, but about life. He noticed she had a dry sense of humor and a quiet strength that drew people in. She, on the other hand, found comfort in his simplicity, the way he didn't treat her like someone fragile, the way he spoke to her like she was just another person. One evening, as she was leaving, she said something that stayed with him. "You know, it's strange," she said. "I've been surrounded by people my whole life, but it's rare to meet someone who actually sees me." He didn't reply immediately. He just nodded, understanding more than he could say. That night, long after he'd put his daughter to bed, he sat by the window thinking. He didn't know where this strange friendship was going or if it even meant anything. But he knew one thing. The woman in the wheelchair had changed something in him. Maybe it was the way she carried herself with quiet grace. Maybe it was the sadness in her smile. Or maybe it was the simple truth that she reminded him that strength comes in many forms. And somewhere deep down, he sensed that she felt the same. Neither of them knew it yet, but their paths had crossed for a reason. What started as a simple meeting at a community center would soon become something far more powerful. A story about seeing beyond what the world sees and finding connection in the most unexpected places. The next few weeks passed quietly, but something had changed around the community center. People talked more, smiled more, and worked harder on the new charity project. It was strange how one person's presence could change the whole energy of a place. The CEO started visiting more often. She no longer arrived with a crowd of assistants or business partners. Instead, she came in a simple car wearing casual clothes, blending in like she belonged there. The first time she came without her assistant, the single dad was surprised. "You sure you don't need help getting around?" he asked. She smiled. "I manage fine. The wheels do most of the work." He grinned. Fair enough. It became normal to see her around the center. Sometimes she joined meetings. Sometimes she sat quietly reading to the kids, and sometimes she just watched from a distance, as if soaking in the life around her. The kids adored her. They never treated her differently, and she loved that. His daughter especially was drawn to her. She would sit next to her during reading sessions, whispering questions or showing her new drawings. One afternoon, while the kids were busy playing, The CEO and the single dad found themselves sitting on a wooden bench outside, under a tree that gave just enough shade. The day was warm, and a soft breeze carried the sounds of laughter from the playground. "You seem comfortable here," he said. She nodded. "It's peaceful. Different from the noise I'm used to." "What kind of noise?" he asked. "The kind where people talk more than they listen?" She said softly. "Meetings, plans, deadlines. My world is full of it. Sometimes I forget what real conversations feel like." He looked at her. "You don't look like the type who forgets much." She smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised. When life moves too fast, you lose track of the things that matter. You start counting achievements instead of moments." He stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "I guess I'm the opposite. I've got more moments than achievements." They both laughed quietly. It wasn't a loud laugh, but one that felt honest. The kind that comes when two people understand each other without needing to explain too much. Later that day, they helped the volunteers pack supplies for an upcoming food drive. The CEO insisted on helping even when he told her to rest. "I didn't come here to sit and watch," she said firmly, handing out bags of rice with her steady hands. He noticed how she never asked for special treatment. If anything, she worked harder than most people there. When one of the volunteers accidentally spilled flour on her clothes, she laughed it off like it was nothing. "I guess I'll blend in now," she joked, brushing it off with a smile. It was moments like that that made people forget she was the head of a major company. Around her, no one saw the wheelchair anymore. They just saw her. One evening, as everyone was packing up, she noticed his daughter struggling to reach something on a shelf. Before he could step in, the CEO wheeled over, lifted the box down, and handed it to her with a smile. "Thank you," the girl said, hugging her without hesitation. The woman froze for a second, surprised, then smiled and hugged her back. That small gesture seemed to mean more to her than anyone realized. After they left that night, he saw her sitting quietly in her car, lost in thought. When she noticed him watching, she waved and smiled. But there was something in her eyes, something soft, something that spoke of memories that hurt to remember. The next day, she came earlier than usual. The center was quiet, only a few people around. He was fixing a broken shelf when he heard her voice. "Do you ever get tired?" she asked. He looked up. "Of what?" "Of holding everything together," she said. "Work, parenting, life." He wiped his hands on a cloth and leaned against the wall. "Every day," he said honestly. "But you keep going. You don't really get a choice when someone depends on you." She nodded slowly. "I understand that more than you think." He tilted his head, curious, but didn't ask. She looked like she wanted to say more, but she stopped herself. Instead, she asked about his daughter's school and how the food drive planning was going. They ended up talking for almost an hour. She shared stories about her early career, how she used to work late nights and dream about changing the world. Then she told him about the accident that changed her life years ago. She didn't go into every detail, but he could hear the pain in her voice when she said, "I thought everything was over. I thought people would stop seeing me as capable." He didn't interrupt. He just listened. Finally, she said, "The hardest part wasn't learning how to move again. It was learning how to be seen again." He looked at her for a long moment before saying, "Maybe people stopped seeing you because you started hiding." She blinked, surprised by his honesty. "Maybe," she whispered. From that day, something shifted between them. Their conversations became deeper, more personal. They talked about their fears, their hopes, their mistakes. Sometimes they argued about small things. She was stubborn, and so was he. But even their disagreements felt alive, real and strangely comforting. One afternoon, they were organizing supplies in the storage room when she teased, "You should really learn to label things properly." "This looks like a treasure hunt," he laughed. "You try managing all this alone. You'll start hiding things just for fun." She raised an eyebrow. "I could still do it better." "Prove it," he said playfully. She smirked. Challenge accepted. They spent the next hour laughing, sorting boxes, and teasing each other like old friends. It was strange how easy it was to be around her. No pretending, no filters. Just two people being themselves. Later that week, the CEO invited him and his daughter to visit her company's office. She wanted to show them how the sponsorship funds were being arranged. He hesitated at first, but his daughter was too excited to say no. When they arrived, everyone in the office stared, not out of rudeness, but curiosity. The powerful CEO was smiling, laughing, and showing them around personally. It was a side of her few people had ever seen. His daughter looked at the tall building and whispered, "Wow, she's like a queen here." He smiled. "She's always been a queen even outside these walls," the CEO overheard and laughed. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me at work." She showed them her office, wide windows, elegant furniture. But the thing that stood out was a small drawing pinned on the wall. It was the rainbow drawing his daughter had made weeks ago. "You kept it," he said quietly. "Of course," she replied. "It reminds me why I do what I do. It reminds me there's more to life than meetings and reports." They shared lunch in the cafeteria, surrounded by employees who couldn't believe their boss was laughing over sandwiches with a community worker and his little girl. After lunch, as they were about to leave, she handed him a small envelope. "It's a proposal," she said, "for expanding the community program. I want to help make it bigger. More schools, more families. I can fund it, but I'll need someone to lead it." He looked surprised. "You mean me?" She nodded. "You care about this place more than anyone. You understand people. That's something money can't buy." He didn't know what to say. "I don't have fancy degrees like your people." She smiled gently. "I don't need fancy. I need real." That night he couldn't stop thinking about her words. It wasn't just a job offer it was trust. Someone like her, who had seen the world, believed in him. Over the following days, he started working closely with her team. They planned new projects together, and slowly, their friendship turned into something deeper, something that didn't need to be spoken out loud. He noticed the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching. A soft, quiet gaze filled with gratitude and warmth, and he couldn't deny the way his heart felt lighter every time she was around. People at the center began whispering about them. Some called it friendship, others something more, but neither of them cared. What they shared was simple, honest, and rare. One evening, as they locked up after another long day, she said softly, "You've changed this place." "You've even changed me," he smiled. "You've done the same for me." As she wheeled toward her car, the sky turned golden. The wind carried the laughter of children still playing nearby. For the first time in a long while, both of them felt something they hadn't felt in years: peace. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both knew. Whatever this connection was, it was real, and maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something beautiful neither of them had been looking for. The new project took off faster than anyone expected. The community center began to change. Brighter walls, better supplies, more volunteers. There was a new energy in the air, something hopeful, something alive. Everyone could feel it. And at the heart of it all were two people who had somehow found a connection neither had been looking for. The single dad had taken charge of the project like he was born for it. He worked long hours, making sure every penny of the funding went to good use. He wasn't the kind of man who liked attention, but people started noticing him, his dedication, his warmth, and his way of bringing everyone together. The CEO came by almost every day, not as a boss, but as part of the team. She would help plan activities, join meetings, and sit with the children during their story sessions. When she was around, the room felt different, calmer somehow, more grounded. She had a quiet way of making people feel important, even when she said very little. But outside that peaceful little world, whispers began to spread. Some people in her company didn't understand why their CEO was spending so much time at a community center. Rumors started, small at first, then louder. "She's distracted," some said. "She's getting too personal," others added. They didn't see the kindness in what she was doing. They only saw what didn't fit their idea of how a CEO should behave. Even some people at the center began to gossip. A few wondered why she cared so much about a single father. "He's just an employee," one person whispered. "Why does she visit him every day?" He heard the talk, of course. People always talk, but he didn't care much. What he cared about was the look on her face when she laughed, the way her eyes softened when his daughter ran into her arms, and the peace he felt whenever they were together. One afternoon, as they were setting up for a charity event, she noticed him working quietly in the corner, fixing a broken display board. "You never stop, do you?" she asked, rolling closer. He looked up with a smile. "If I stop, things fall apart. Maybe sometimes you should let someone else fix things," she said gently. He thought about it for a second, then replied, "I'm not sure I know how." She smiled, but her eyes carried something deeper, a quiet understanding. "You remind me of myself," she said softly. "Always holding everything together, afraid that if you rest, it'll all fall apart." He looked at her for a long moment. "And does it?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "But that's life. You rebuild." They stood there in silence for a while, both lost in thought. When the event began, the hall filled with people. The children performed songs, local families shared their stories, and volunteers spoke about what the center meant to them. The CEO sat near the front, clapping and smiling proudly. When the single dad went on stage to thank everyone, he looked nervous. Public speaking wasn't his thing, but when his eyes met hers in the crowd, he felt steady again. "I'm not great with speeches," he began, his voice honest and a little shaky. "But I just want to say thank you. This place isn't just a building. It's a family, and none of this would have been possible without someone who believed in us when no one else did." He glanced at her again, and she smiled, touched. Later, after everyone left, they sat together in the quiet hall, surrounded by leftover decorations and empty chairs. The lights were dim, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and paint. "That was beautiful," she said. "I nearly forgot my own name up there," he admitted with a laugh. "You were perfect," she said. "You spoke from the heart. People feel that." He looked at her, his expression softening. "You've done a lot for us. I don't know how to thank you." "Don't," she said quietly. "You already have." There was something about the way she said it, gentle but full of emotion. He didn't ask what she meant, but deep down he understood. The next few days were busy. Reporters came to cover the story of the community center's transformation. Photos were taken, articles were written, and for a while everything felt like a dream. But dreams have a way of attracting attention, not all of it good. One morning, the single dad arrived at work to find people whispering and looking at him strangely. His friend handed him a newspaper. On the front page was a picture, him and the CEO standing close together after the event, smiling. The headline read, "Local worker and CEO too close for comfort?" The story wasn't cruel, but it hinted at something more than friendship. It questioned her professionalism, suggested she was being influenced by someone beneath her. He felt his stomach drop. When she arrived later that day, he saw the hurt in her eyes before she even spoke. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't think it would turn into this." "It's not your fault," he said. "But it is," she replied. "They're attacking you because of me." He shook his head. "Let them talk. We know the truth." She looked away, her hands tightening on her wheelchair's handles. "You don't understand. This could damage everything I've worked for. My board, my investors, they're already asking questions." He took a slow breath. "So what happens now?" "I don't know," she said softly. "Maybe I should stay away for a while. Let things calm down." Her words hit him like a punch. He wanted to argue, to tell her that walking away wouldn't solve anything. But when he saw the worry in her face, he couldn't bring himself to make it harder for her. "If that's what you need," he said quietly, "I'll understand." She looked at him for a long time, as if memorizing his face. "You've been the one real thing in my life for a long time," she whispered. "Please don't hate me for this." He smiled sadly. "I could never hate you." And just like that, she was gone. Days turned into weeks. The center went on, but everything felt different. He missed her voice, her laughter, the calm she brought wherever she went. His daughter asked about her often, wondering when she'd come back. He always said soon, even when he wasn't sure he believed it. He tried to stay busy, organizing events, helping families, fixing things that didn't really need fixing. But no matter how much he worked, there was a quiet ache in his chest that wouldn't go away. Then one evening he saw her again, not in person, but on TV. She was giving a speech at a corporate conference. Her voice was steady, her smile professional, but he could see the sadness behind it. She talked about leadership, resilience, and how sometimes strength means stepping away from what you love. He turned off the TV halfway through. It hurt too much to watch. A few days later, a letter arrived at the community center. It was from her. She thanked him for everything, said she needed time to focus on her company, and hoped he would keep the project alive. At the bottom she wrote, "You reminded me what it means to be seen. Don't lose that part of yourself." He read it over and over, the words blurring as his eyes filled with tears. He missed her more than he could admit, even to himself. Life went on. Months passed. The center grew stronger, the community closer. But no matter how much he achieved, something always felt unfinished. Then one afternoon, while he was cleaning up after a long day, his daughter ran in, waving her hands excitedly. "Daddy, she's back!" He froze. When he turned around, there she was, sitting by the door, watching quietly, a soft smile on her face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said, "I couldn't stay away forever." He laughed softly, walking closer. "I was starting to think you forgot about us." "Never," she said. "I just needed to remember who I was. And when I did, I realized that person is someone who belongs here too." He looked at her, really looked, and saw something different. She seemed lighter, freer, more at peace. "Welcome home," he said quietly. She smiled. "It feels like home." They didn't need to say anything more. The silence between them was enough. It wasn't the end of their story, not yet. But it was a new beginning, and somewhere deep down, both of them knew that sometimes life pulls people apart just to bring them back together stronger than before. The day she returned felt like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long storm. Everyone at the community center was happy to see her again, especially the children. But for him, it was something more. He tried to act normal, but deep down he couldn't stop smiling. She had changed in small ways. Her voice was calmer, her eyes softer. There was a peace about her now, as if she had finally made peace with her world. When she rolled into the center that first day, the volunteers stopped what they were doing to greet her. She laughed and told them to get back to work, teasing that they hadn't improved their coffee in her absence. Later that day, when most people had left, she found him fixing a light in the hallway. "You're still doing everything yourself," she said. He looked down from the ladder with a grin. "Some things never change." "Some things shouldn't," she said softly. He climbed down and stood in front of her, wiping his hands. For a moment, neither spoke. There was so much between them. Things left unsaid, emotions both had tried to hide. Finally, he said, "It's good to see you back." "It's good to be back," she replied. "I missed this place." He hesitated, then added quietly, "We missed you too." Over the next few weeks, things slowly fell into rhythm again. She returned to helping with programs, organizing events, and guiding the center's expansion. But now she did it differently, not as a distant leader, but as someone who truly wanted to be part of something real. The community had changed since she'd been gone. The food drives had grown bigger, the after-school program had doubled in size, and more families were involved. But her return brought back the spark that had been missing. People noticed how much calmer he seemed when she was around. They worked side by side easily, finishing each other's sentences and sharing quiet smiles. His daughter followed her everywhere, showing her new drawings and stories. One afternoon, while everyone was setting up for a family fair, he noticed her sitting alone outside, looking at the children playing. He walked over and sat beside her on the bench. "You're quiet today," he said. She smiled faintly. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how strange life can be," she said softly. "A year ago, I was living in a world where everything was measured. Success, profits, image. I thought that was all that mattered. And then I met you and your daughter, and suddenly all those things felt small." He watched her as she spoke, noticing the emotion in her voice. "I used to think strength meant never showing weakness," she continued. "But now I think real strength is in being honest, with yourself and others." He nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why you're stronger now." She looked at him, her eyes bright in the fading sunlight. "You've changed me," she said quietly. "You made me see myself again." He smiled gently. "You've changed me too." They sat there for a long while, not needing to say anything more. But life, as it often does, had another test waiting for them. One morning, a call came from her office. The company board was unhappy again. The negative stories from before had faded, but investors were still questioning her judgment. They didn't like her spending time away from corporate work, even if it was for charity. They wanted her to step back completely from the community center and focus on the business. She was torn. The company was her life's work. She had built it from nothing. But the center had become her heart, and walking away from it, from him and his daughter, felt impossible. That evening, she told him about it. "They want me to choose," she said, frustration in her voice. "They say I've lost focus. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "What do you want to do?" She sighed. "That's the problem. I don't know anymore. I used to think the company was everything. But now, I feel alive here. This place, these people, they remind me of who I was before everything got complicated." He nodded. "Maybe that's what you needed, to remember." She looked at him, her eyes soft but uncertain. "If I walk away from it all, people will say I failed." He smiled gently. "And if you stay for the wrong reasons, you'll lose yourself again. What people say doesn't matter. What you feel does." Her gaze lingered on him, and for a brief moment she forgot about everything else in the company, the board, the judgment. All she saw was someone who believed in her when no one else did. A few days later, the board scheduled a meeting. They wanted answers. The morning of the meeting, she stopped by the community center one last time before heading to her office. He was there helping a group of kids set up art materials. When she approached, he smiled. "Big day?" She nodded. "Maybe the biggest." "Then go show them who you really are," he said. She smiled, but her eyes were glistening. "I'm scared." He reached out and gently touched her hand. "You don't have to be. You've already proven your strength. Not in boardrooms, but right here." She held his gaze for a long second. Then she said quietly, "Thank you for seeing me." That day she walked, rolled, into that meeting with calm confidence. The board members expected explanations, maybe even apologies. But she gave them neither. She spoke with honesty and heart. She told them how the charity work had reminded her what real leadership meant, that leading wasn't about power or image, but about purpose. Some disagreed, others listened quietly. When she finished, she said one last thing before leaving. "If doing good makes you question my ability to lead, then maybe this isn't the place for me anymore." She walked out, not knowing what would come next. Days passed before anyone heard what happened. Then, one morning the news spread. She had stepped down as CEO. When she arrived at the community center that afternoon, no one knew what to say. He saw her come in, and before he could speak, she smiled faintly and said, "I did it." He blinked in surprise. "You left?" She nodded. "It was time. Are you okay?" he asked. She laughed softly. "I've never felt lighter." He smiled back, relief flooding his chest. "Then welcome to freedom." She spent the rest of the day helping around like she always did, reading to kids, laughing with volunteers, drinking bad coffee with him. It was as if nothing had changed, and yet everything had. That evening, as they walked outside together, she looked up at the sky turning gold with sunset. "You know," she said quietly, "I thought I'd feel lost without that title. But instead I feel found." He looked at her with a gentle smile. "Maybe that's what happens when you finally start living for yourself." She nodded slowly. "Maybe." He hesitated, then said softly, "I'm proud of you." Her eyes glistened again. "You've always been." There was a silence between them, warm, peaceful, full of things neither needed to say. His daughter came running out of the building, holding a small paper flower she'd made. "This is for you," she said, handing it to her. The woman took it, her hands trembling slightly. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "She made it for brave people," the little girl said. She said, "You're the bravest person she knows." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She looked at the child, then at him. "She's wrong," she said softly. "Her father is." He smiled, but his throat tightened. As the sun went down, they stood there quietly, a man, a woman, and a child, surrounded by laughter and light. There was no wealth, no status, no judgment, just people who had found something rare: understanding. In that moment, everything made sense. She had lost her title, but found her peace. He had struggled for years to keep his life from falling apart, and somehow, through her, he found hope again. And even though neither of them spoke the words, both knew what their hearts were already saying. Sometimes love doesn't need a label or a promise. Sometimes it's simply about seeing someone, truly seeing them, and choosing to stay no matter what changes. That night when she left, he stood by the door watching her car fade into the distance. He didn't feel sad this time. He felt grateful, and for the journey, for the lessons, and for the kind of connection that life gives only once. He didn't know what the future would bring. But one thing was certain. The woman who came into his world in a wheelchair had taught him more about courage, kindness, and love than anyone ever could. And in return, Without even realizing it, he had given her something she thought she'd lost forever: the feeling of being truly alive. Life at the community center had never felt more alive. The laughter of children, the chatter of volunteers, the smell of fresh paint and coffee. It all felt warmer somehow, as if the place itself had opened its arms to welcome new beginnings. For him, the single dad, every day was still full of challenges, but now there was something different, a lightness he hadn't felt in years. She was back. The woman in the wheelchair, once a stranger, now a quiet, steady presence in his life, had returned for good. That morning, as he helped arrange tables for a community picnic, he noticed her smiling from across the yard. She was chatting with a group of parents, laughing freely, her eyes sparkling with that quiet strength he had come to admire. The sun fell on her gently, highlighting the resilience in her face. He realized just how much she had changed the energy around them. It wasn't only about her presence, but the way she made everyone feel seen. Important, alive. His daughter ran up to her, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked on the way to the picnic. "Look what I made for you," she said, holding them up proudly. She took the flowers, her hands shaking slightly. "These are perfect," she whispered, kneeling down to the child's level. "You know, they're exactly what I needed today." He watched quietly, heart swelling, noticing the way she connected with his daughter. There was no pretense, no fear, just honesty and warmth. Over the past months, he had seen many sides of her: the leader, the vulnerable woman, the playful friend, but seeing her like this, fully present, made him realize how deeply she had become a part of their lives. After the picnic, when most of the families had left, the two of them stayed behind to clean up. He passed her a broom with a smile. "You sure you want to help?" "You could sit for a bit," she shook her head. "No, I want to do this. With you." It was a simple sentence, but it carried weight. For so long, both had lived cautiously, protecting themselves from the world's judgment. But now there was trust. There was shared responsibility. There was a quiet understanding that some connections were worth standing in the middle of chaos for. While they worked, they talked. About small things at first, and the picnic, the kids, the food. Then about bigger things, dreams, fears, and memories they hadn't shared before. She spoke about her time in the corporate world, how stepping down had been terrifying yet liberating. She explained how being in the center, helping others, had reminded her of who she really was. Not the CEO, not the woman everyone expected her to be, but simply herself. He listened, amazed at her honesty. It struck him how far she had come, how much courage it took to choose authenticity over expectation. And in that moment he realized how much he admired her, not just for surviving, but for daring to live fully without apology. When the cleanup was done, they stood in the quiet yard, looking at the sun setting over the trees, the colors reflected off the windows of the center, painting everything in gold. She turned toward him, a small smile on her lips. "You know," she said softly, "I don't think I could have done this without you." He raised an eyebrow. "Without me?" "Yes," she said. "You treated me like a person. Not someone to be judged, not someone to be pitied, just someone. That's rare," he smiled, feeling warmth spread through him. "And you? You've changed me too. You've shown me that life isn't just about surviving. It's about seeing people, really seeing them, and giving them space to be themselves." They stood quietly, words fading into the evening. There was no need for declarations or promises yet. Their connection spoke louder than anything they could say. Over the following weeks, their bond grew stronger. They spent time together beyond the center. Simple things like walks in the park, shared coffees, and reading together in the library. Each moment felt natural, unforced. His daughter adored her, often insisting she join them for meals or playtime. And she in turn found joy in these small, ordinary interactions, the kind of joy that business success had never given her. One evening, as they were leaving the center after a long day, he paused near the gate. The streetlights cast a soft glow and the air smelled faintly of rain from earlier that day. "You've changed a lot," he said softly. She looked at him, curious. "How so?" "In a good way," he replied. "You make people feel safe. You make me feel safe. And you make this world, our little world, better just by being in it." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "And you make me brave. Brave enough to be seen, brave enough to care without fear. Brave enough to love again? He took a deep breath, his heart pounding. Then I guess we're both lucky. She reached out and took his hand, holding it gently. It wasn't dramatic or forced. It was natural, real. He felt the warmth of her touch and realized that sometimes love doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in quiet moments of trust and understanding. As the days passed, they faced new challenges, but together, they felt capable of handling anything. The community center continued to grow, helping more families, more children, more lives, and through it all they had each other. A partnership built on respect, trust, and quiet love. One weekend, the center organized a celebration for the children, with music, games, and laughter filling the air. As he watched the kids run around, he noticed her watching them too, her eyes soft, a content smile on her face. For the first time in years, he realized she wasn't hiding behind her past or her achievements. She was living fully, and she had brought him along with her. Later that evening, they sat together on a bench, the stars beginning to appear above. His daughter had fallen asleep in the car, tired from the day's excitement. The air was cool, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and fresh grass. "You know," he said quietly, "I never imagined life could be like this." She turned to him. "Like what?" "Simple," he said. "Full of ordinary moments that feel extraordinary because you're in them. I used to think life was about surviving, but now it feels like living." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "That's exactly how I feel too. I used to think strength was about standing tall no matter what, but now I know it's about staying true, about loving fully, and about letting someone see all of you." He looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman who had come into his life quietly, without warning, and changed everything, not because she needed to be saved, but because they had found each other at exactly the right time. "In exactly the right way, I guess," he said a little shyly. "We're lucky to have found each other." She nodded, eyes glistening. "The luckiest." Days turned into months, and their relationship deepened. They faced challenges together, small disagreements, moments of doubt, the pressures of life. But they always came back to each other. Through it all, they learned that love isn't about perfection or grand gestures. It's about patience, understanding, and choosing to see someone for who they truly are. One afternoon, as the community center held a small celebration for a successful fundraising campaign, he noticed her standing quietly, looking at him across the room. Their eyes met, and in that silent moment, everything was said. The laughter, the struggles, the quiet victories, all of it led to this point. They were no longer just friends, no longer just allies. They were partners in the truest sense. When the event ended, they stepped outside together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. His daughter ran ahead, picking flowers and chasing butterflies, her laughter ringing through the air. He looked at her, then at the woman beside him, and felt a surge of gratitude. "You know," he said softly, "I never thought life could be this full." She smiled, leaning slightly closer. "It's full because we choose to see it that way. And because we see each other," he nodded, understanding. "I'll always see you." "And I'll always see you," she replied. For the first time in a long time, they didn't worry about what others thought. There were no rumors, no judgments, no pressures, only the quiet certainty that they belonged in each other's lives. They knew life would continue to challenge them, but they also knew that together they could face anything. As they watched the sunset, holding hands, he realized something profound. Love isn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It's about showing up, being present, and choosing to see someone fully, without fear, without reservation. It's about being brave enough to stay when the world says leave, to care when the world says ignore, and to trust when the world says doubt. And in that golden moment, with the air filled with laughter, music, and the scent of flowers, he knew they had done exactly that. They had seen each other, fully and without hesitation, and in doing so, had changed each other's lives forever. The single dad had shown her that life could be more than titles, judgments, and limitations. And she had shown him that love, in its quiet, patient, and honest form, could transform even the simplest moments into something extraordinary. Together, they walked back toward the center, his daughter running ahead, the evening sky casting long shadows behind them. There was no need for words. The connection they shared said everything. Their hearts, their actions, and their presence told the story that words could never capture. A story of courage, understanding and love that sees beyond limits. And so, in the quiet beauty of ordinary life, they found something extraordinary: each other.